Breaking news as industry expert Grant Cardone comes forward to acknowledge that the housing market cannot be fixed. And while I agree with him that the housing market cannot be fixed, I don't know necessarily whether I agree on why it cannot be fixed. And so today I have our community expert, once again, Mitch Vexler, here to go into that video and to break it down. And then you guys, we have something incredibly special planned for you today as we go under the hood to discuss what the real problem actually is. And the way we're going to do that is by listening to a couple of viewers, a couple of property owners. So we've done an interview, and those property owners are going to tell you as the viewers what the problem really is and what to be careful of. A warning to you. And in addition to that, you guys, this is absolutely incredible. We have bombshell audio, and it is absolutely shocking audio that you guys are going to listen to. And I'm going to ask you, isn't this fraud? I mean, it appears to be a fraud cover-up, bombshell stuff. Again, I have Mitch Vexler here. And before I begin, Mitch, how's everything going? Any new calls from attorneys? Any new cases opened? How's everything going on the fight?
North Carolina, Detroit, and I'm not sure why Detroit in particular, but yes, Detroit, and two more out of Ohio. So yeah, there's attorneys reaching out. It really is stunning as to how far spread this problem is. I knew it was, but obviously we don't have the ability to study every state. But nonetheless, anything that touches USPAP, including Canada, Ontario, is in truth being ignored. USPAP's being ignored, and therefore the fraud is just simply rampant. And as it turns out, multiple countries.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mitch, thank you for your time today, and thank you for kind of digging into this first story before we go under the hood. I know you guys, Mitch loves going under the hood. He loves going right to the math. We're going to get there. But first, I want you to listen to, what Grant's saying, and let me know, Mitch, whether or not you agree with it. And let's start with this segment.
Invested in data centers. Give us your take on the real estate outlook today.
Well, we still have a seller's-buyer's gap, Maria, and until interest rates breach 4%, go back to below 4%, you're not going to see the volume necessary to unlock the supply-demand formula, which means basically when rates come down, sellers will finally reduce their prices. That's not happening yet, even despite interest rates spiking above 7%. We still have not seen the price on homes come down and become affordable enough for people to actually buy a home or qualify for a home and instead have been renting. That's why I'm so pro rental apartment communities for investment properties for middle class Americans.
Mitch, I'm not sure that he even answered the question at all, but he did say something that kind of hit me a little bit. I'm not sure, what his angle here is, but he's essentially saying once we pierce 4% and we're below 4%, it sounds like what he's saying that there's going to be an increase of people that are going to get off the sidelines to sell their house. Probably maybe not going to be affordable yet. What is your take on what he just said? Do you think in order to get back to, sustainable levels of affordability that we need rates under 4%? Is that what's going to do it, Mitch?
I understand Grant Cardone. I've actually read two of his prospectuses. He is speaking his book. It's not that there's anything to disagree with what he said. The problem is it didn't go far enough. And you can make an argument that says, well, if interest rates stay the same, markets will level off. The problem with what he said was that there's no connection between the idea of lowering interest rates and the fraud that has been perpetrated on anybody that's associated with USPAP or comes in contact with it. So what you have, again, is this cumulative compounding effect of a fraud that has pushed values up by virtue of inflation, and inflation is a tax. So the idea that, okay, we're going to lower interest rates, yeah, okay, fine. You want to have that debate? Let's go. But the fact of the matter is that is not doing a thing to fix the fraud. And it is the fraud that is accumulated over and above everything else, the inflation. It's a compounding inflation. So what the CADs are doing is taxing. They figured out, we'll just keep taxing the hell out of this, which is in fact a tax on inflation. They ignore USPAP. Therefore, that's another fraud. So it's a fraud on top of a fraud. And then if you talk about the state of Texas specifically, You have the property valuation study, which is created by the state comptroller, which is another fraud. So you've got three sets of fraud pushing these values up. And the interest rates, again, go and look at an amortization schedule. That'll tell you what the damage is. Add the amortization schedule to the rule of 7. You're being ripped off to the tune of 2 times up every 4.5 to 7 years, depending what the damage is that's being inflicted by the Fed. So there's now 4 sets of fraud.
I mean, that's just 4 sets of fraud that you just so happen to mention right now, Mitch. Obviously, there's layers and layers upon fraud. Now, here's what you mentioned that I hope the viewers got. I mean, you said he's kind of speaking to his book, and that makes sense because on one hand, he's saying that housing cannot be fixed, essentially implying, I believe, that it is broken. But on the other hand, he's still saying he's investing in the market. So I want you to hear this next clip, Mitch, and tell me whether or not his investment advice is foolish or maybe you think it's good. Let's listen.
With whether they pay their rent or not. The things that people should be doing right now, I believe apartment communities around America are the single best investment going forward for the next 10, 20, and 30 years. And this is why. In blue states, you want to avoid those states because of the heavy regulations, the unpredictability of taxes being increased, okay, like overnight.
Yep.
And the renters having basically more power than the property owner.
Mitch, it looks like he's getting a little political, maybe a little biased. First of all, I'm sure, as you could probably tell the viewers, being a landlord is not necessarily a good job at all. But do you agree with what he's saying as far as, in good investments still being there? Or do you kind of think that's more of a narrative push? What was your take on that?
Again, he's clearly talking his book because he buys assets and then he syndicates those assets out. And that's perfectly fine. No harm, no foul. The problem is you have to break everything down into buckets. So are you going to buy a 30-year-old apartment building? What cap rate are you going to buy that building on? Are you going to buy a brand new, the most expensive luxury building? And what cap rate are you going to buy that on? The idea that things are going to be good for the next 10 or 20 years, who the hell knows? What we're dealing with right now is the fraud. And his statements completely ignore everything that's going on with mom and pop. Now, 37% of the households are going to go bankrupt and or lose their home. Well, where are they going to go? The vast majority will be forced into multifamily. There's no doubt about it. We saw this in 2008 and 2009. I was a beneficiary, my properties were a beneficiary of that exact circumstance. When you saw in the market the house builders pumping values of houses and saying, well, we're going to give you 4% money, but the value of the houses started to clip up. So that combination meant people could not afford the houses. They had no choice but to go to multifamily. The Barron's was one of those recipients. We actually ended up at 103% occupancy. Go figure that one out. We had a waiting list. So partly what he's saying, I agree with. Partly what he's saying, he's stuck in a box because Fox won't give him enough time to explain it in depth. And he knows, he's fully aware. But we have the benefit here in these videos of being able to break this down and explain it so that everybody understands what's happening around them. And so, yeah, I hear what he's saying. Nobody knows what the benefit is in terms of construction costs. Myself, my company, as a builder, developer, am I looking to jump out there? No, right now, I'm not under construction. The reason why, in reality, are these CADs. I cannot expose my company to something that I know is abject extortion. I'm not going to get involved with it. I'm not going to go and drop $5 million in parts on the ground in the first 60 days, only for a CAD to show up and say, well, you've got $5 million in 2x4s out there. Pay the tax on it. I'm sorry, that would be the equivalent of a sales tax. You understand the problem? Every time the plate is straight up extortion. And that's what they're doing to mom and pop.
Well, Mitch, I don't know that he would agree. Let's listen to what Grant thinks that the problem is.
In the needs and demand for more electricity. These are basically empty boxes that support chillers and electricity. But housing cannot be fixed in this country, no matter what anyone does. There's no such thing as affordable housing. Every major city, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, all these cities that talk about affordable housing, the housing has become less affordable. In fact, the top 15 markets in the country are all blue states where the housing gap, the mortgage the gap between the mortgage and the rent is double today, and it will continue to get wider and wider until interest rates get lower. Hopefully Donald Trump gets in there in a year from now. I predict that we'll see a 2% interest rate, and we'll see housing rocking again in this country.
Sounds like, Mitch, he's saying that in order for housing to come back to balance, we need low rates and for Trump to get elected. Now, we're about to go under the hood here, but as we transition now to looking under the hood, can you, and you have been, but is that the real problem, Mitch? Do you think that all of the situation that's going on here would be fixed depending on the president?
No. Donald Trump will be able to blunt the problems that are coming. He cannot stop the problems that are coming. And clearly, I'm not trying to be political either side. I think the world knows where I stand. I'm the ultimate definition of an economic conservative. And the reality is that, as we explained yesterday, the definition of bankruptcy is when your liabilities exceed your assets. There's $142 trillion, and there are no assets to back it up. This will come unwound and must come unwound in order to fix the problem. You can unwind it and get in front of it and try and blunt that damage. Absolutely, that can be done. But until the powers that be start reading, and we're giving them the documents, on the Mockingbird site, it's all there. The documents are there to be read. And just recently, so as you know, the Tarrant Appraisal District came out, and the new board members are trying to be extremely helpful to the taxpayers, but they don't understand the ramifications of how this plays out in real time. On the other hand, so what they're saying is, okay, fine, we're going to try and limit the increase of taxes, be it an annual or biannual or every 3 years. It doesn't matter. And then, so on one hand, they're saying, well, we're going to do this over here. That would be the Tarrant Appraisal District. And then just this morning, Fort Worth came out and said, oh, no, we need you to keep this fraud rolling forward because we need the money to cover up the bankruptcy. Like, left hand give us, right hand take us away. Ergo, they're not paying attention to anything, nor do they give a damn. You have a cast of cartoon characters here literally jacking with every single real estate person's tax life. And that must come to an end. And that is what Grant Cardone didn't get into. And I wish he did. Because it's important.
Let's get into it now, Mitch, and let's start going under the hood. And I wanted to take a pause real quick because I've been reading the comments on these videos, and one of the things I want to clarify for you guys is CAD, okay? CAD is the central, it stands for the Central Appraisal District. And when you hear like DCAD or HCAD, usually that's the county CAD. Like HCAD is Harris County Appraisal District. But the CAD is the Central Appraisal District and is essentially in charge of valuing our properties to pay for the state and county services, firefighters, schools, things like that. And also, you guys, as far as USPAP, okay, I've been getting a lot of questions. What's USPAP? USPAP, well, let me show you guys real quick by throwing up this appraisal. Now, for the people that have been following me, I've been talking about these appraisals for the last year and a half. Now, what you're looking at right there is you're looking at a clean appraisal. And USPAP is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practices, okay? And that is how that appraisal that you guys see on the screen was generated. And that's how value is calculated. And basically what we're saying is those counties ain't doing anywhere close to what I just showed you as far as the regulation. Now, did I cover that okay before we jump into the first interview, Mitch?
Yes, if everybody picked up on what that form looks like, and you walked in with a very similar form to a CAD using real comparisons under 2301B and 2301E of the Texas Property Tax Code, you would have them. Now, it doesn't mean that the CAD is going to honor the law, which clearly they don't. However, that would set yourself and your attorneys up for a lawsuit should you decide to file that lawsuit, because then you have the actual evidence. If you follow 2301B, 2301E, and under the Texas Constitution, under uniform and equal, plus that chart, you do four things, you've set yourself up to win.
let's listen to our first video, and let me play this, Mitch, and then I'll come back, get your reactions, and then I really want to play that audio. Let's ask an ex-firefighter, an ex-captain, Jerry, what the real problem is. And I have Jerry here that is spearheading the overvaluation fraud for a neighborhood. He's essentially helping 15, 20 people, trying to reduce the value on 40 different properties. And so Jerry's going to discuss what he had to go through to fight the Central Appraisal District to stop them from essentially committing value fraud and, making things so unaffordable for you and your family that, I mean, geez, man, can you just, tell the viewers, Jerry, what happened exactly, and the fact that you're spearheading, this massive overvaluation situation going on in your neighborhood?
I do know how it feels going through the process every single year with percentage increases that can range from 40 to 100, and occasionally a 300%, will pop up. That it's unrealistic, and it creates the demand for a lot of manpower on both sides of the spectrum, the taxpayer and DCAD and ARB, to to combat all of this for the people that don't, and for the people that want to, that want to fight against it. And so, and then it creates a situation to where people don't protest. Then they become a comp that's really high, that is aggressively used in order to run everybody's value up, and then people can't afford it. And so,
and Jerry, can I ask you, man? You said something I didn't realize until right now. You said you've seen a 300% increase, from 40 to 300% increase. Can I ask you, Jerry, is the assessor showing you the math on how they're calculating that?
Not really. Once we get to the point of protesting and talking with a negotiator at DCAD, and let's say they have a 300% increase or some, and by the way, I was trying to reduce the number of protests and negotiated that one down to doubling. Okay. So if so they've got me trained well enough to be happy with doubling. I'll put it that way. Now, in that particular situation, but how it's presented is they're basically going outside whatever it takes to pursue more expensive comparisons, up to and including putting all the value on sales comps on the land, so that they can say the land is worth more value. Now they can go get anybody, no matter whether they got a house or not, or whether the house is very old. They can, if they play with those numbers on a sales comp, then they can drive the land prices up. And basically it gets to be something that somebody can't afford based on what they expected to pay a few years ago.
In other words, Jerry, it doesn't sound like there's any honest math at all. And that's really what we're trying to uncover here. And another thing that I want the viewers to understand is how that, it takes people like you in a neighborhood to stand up to enlighten other people. As Mitch says all the time, people understand there's something wrong, but they don't understand how to articulate it. So, I mean, honestly, Jerry, the community needs you. And so can I ask you, sir, as someone that has served the community, as a firefighter, captain, EMS, all of these types of things, you've changed people's life for the better. What change do you want to see come to, these, the way that we're taxed?
Well, that's pretty easy to see when you have to go in and labor intensely on both sides, fight outrageous increases where the prior year is totally disregarded. I mean, it's not to be mentioned, not to be talked about. You go before ARB, they'll tell you can't even talk about your negotiations with DCAD because that's secret, I guess. I don't get it. They could cut down on the need for a whole lot of labor and a whole lot of upset taxpayers if they treated everything the market value. You can't have respect for the year before and then jump 60 to 300% and think that there's any regard for the year before, or think that there's any realistic changes that ever happened to that. So the caps that they have, like the homestead exemption at 10%, if that was placed on a market value, then the only people that would come in is who cares to fight 10%. Okay. And there's a lot of years you could justify 10% based on sales. And I wouldn't even fuss with it. I mean, I've already negotiated to have things go from 300% to doubling just to get out of going to ARB and be happy with it. So they're creating the need for a manpower that they don't have, and then you don't get the help when you go in. So in a nutshell, you want to say you want to say fix it, make market value the same as a homestead exemption, where there is a cap on what they can do from the year before.
Or, I mean, even simple, honest math that doesn't take you months to try to figure out what they're doing. And then, then I just go back to homeowners that we got other things that we're worried about, man, like putting food on the table and our children in school and, a whole bunch of other things. We shouldn't have to fight like this every single year. And so I want to ask you this last question. Okay. Do you think overtaxation is the biggest problem in real estate?
I think it is absolutely the biggest problem, at least in Texas real estate, at least in our boomtown area where things have been booming. So you got to expect some increases. But when it's obvious that the system is cherry picking values in order to go up on everybody, even though there are some sales comps that could say, oh, well, this one sold for that house down the street sold for $1 million. Somebody came in from California. Well, that don't mean everybody's is worth $1 million. Sorry. And so they're fabricating their own inflation and they're cherry picking comps in order to do this. And it's a lot of work to go in to try to prove that every single year. And sometimes you're successful, sometimes you're not. But plain and simple, your homestead cap is there for a reason to protect homeowners for more than 10%. Now you're cursing them to a lifetime if you let the market value go up so much. And I refuse to do that. I refuse to say that just because I got a 10% homestead or a 20% circuit breaker cap, that I'm okay with a 300% increase and curse myself or my neighbor to eventually something they can't afford. I saw how that worked in your mortgage interest rates that kept climbing on those old loans. I saw what that did to people. They couldn't live there no more. So taxes, they're doing the same thing with taxes now. I don't appreciate it.
No, a lot of us don't. I mean, it's becoming more and more unaffordable. The nation's starting to realize that. They're starting to wake up. And the other issue is these municipalities and schools are depending on the accurate assessment to run their businesses. So the fact that it's being ran on overvaluation is really unbelievable. But either way, Jerry, I'm going to get out of here. I really appreciate your time, man. Bless you. Thank you for continuing, even when you're retired. Thank you for continuing, making a positive impact on the community, brother.
Thank you.
Pretty powerful member of his community. What are your thoughts on him stepping up for his community like that?
Jerry is a very soft-spoken individual, and he has a heart that's extremely large. He knows what's right. He did the best as anybody could do under the circumstance without understanding all the idiosyncrasies of every law that touches these CADs. And the reality of it is the CADs don't give a damn. That's what happened to them. And we're going to hear from a couple other people where you have the exact same situation. They don't give a damn. They do not understand what the laws are. They don't know, as the ARB panel members, what they're supposed to do under the law. They don't understand what the CADs are supposed to do under the law in terms of adhering to USPAP, adhering to the Texas Property Tax Code, adhering to the Texas Constitution. And therefore, the waterfall effect is such that these members who signed an oath, these members of the ARB panels who signed an oath, should be sued, personally liable for violating that oath. And they can be prosecuted. It is a third-degree felony. And every time we get more information on tape, let's just say that you have the right to remain silent, and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, because that's coming to you. Flip side of the coin, I've got some other things that I'd like to say with regard to the CADs, but we'll get there shortly.
Yeah, speaking of being on tape, Mitch, let's go ahead and play that tape now from, it's just a shocking tape. It's from the chief appraiser And I mean, I don't know how else to look at it but fraud, but I don't want to say anything yet. We'll let the viewers listen to this, but I wanted to remind the viewers what ARB is. Again, I'm looking at the comments. An ARB is an appraisal review board. The ARB is designed to be in place to make sure you're not being overvalued. So big failure on the ARB side, in addition to all the other failures. So that's what the ARB is. Let's listen to this right now, Mitch. Let me throw it up on the screen real quick. You guys, this is absolutely shocking.
There comes a point in time when you have a deadline that you're trying to meet, and you just got to go. You know, we got to get the work done. You know, we have current outstanding tickets that we had put in prior to this that still haven't been responded to, and so it's, you know, as a business decision, you know, if we have somebody that's capable of, you know, running the process outside of the software.
First of all, Mitch, just to confirm what he just said, I mean, this is the chief appraiser now acknowledging he pulled data out of the system, and he's basically saying, you just got to do what you got to do. Business is business. It was a business decision to do that. Am I following this correctly so far? Am I missing something here so far?
Benton Central Appraisal District is the gift that keeps on giving.
All right. Well,
it's quite interesting that Thursday's meeting last week was a 26-minute meeting that, as far as we could tell in the history of their existence, that's never happened. It's clear that their attorneys are watching these videos. And it's also just as clear that their attorneys told everybody, shut the F up, because there was nothing said in that meeting last week. And that's, as far as we've been involved in this since 2016, that's never happened. Well, when you hear the chief appraiser stating we took 60,000 properties outside of the database, manipulated them.
Let's let the, you know what? Let's let the viewers listen to that now. And again, you guys, this is the chief appraiser stating this on record. And remember, you guys, this is just a business decision. This has nothing to do with law. It has everything to do with his business.
There's a delay to that process because, you know, truth be told, I mean, if the system was working the way it should, we should be able to just run the process and it would be seamless, and, you know, the output would be ready and we would be able to send the file. But that's not the case.
Are we paying this vendor?
It's our appraisal software. It's all one big license agreement. So yes.
So can that be evaluated and at some point upgraded to something that would work? Because that is a bigger problem than a lot of our others.
Yeah. When she pulls that data out, is she dropping it into Excel and into Access? She's just dropping it into Excel, doing the calculations that way. So imagine that.
No.
Imagine that, y'all.
I mean, you're talking about 60,000, give or take, properties that she's having to run through this process on. She's having to walk off because of the SB 12 and SB 2 stuff. She has to walk all the way backwards to 2018 and start walking it all the way back forward.
Right.
Wow.
So you figure pulling that data out, dumping it into Excel. So you're now taking something that should be a static record. All you do is apply the program to it. You pull it out, then you have to apply the changes to it and then dump it back in there. The potential, and Rebecca does an amazing job, but the potential for any type of error just exponentially explodes.
Well, and that's part of it too, because she has to take an extra step once she's put it back in. We have to have some QC on it and error checks and make sure before we proceed forward to the next step.
Mitch, can you clarify, are there any QC, is there any QC in place or any error checks in place to, you know, have any type of protection for the taxpayer if Rebecca makes any errors on that 60,000, 60,000 pieces of data, 60,000 properties that she's taking out of a system, putting into Excel, manipulating it, putting it back in. They're acknowledging the room for massive errors. What am I missing here, Mitch?
What you just heard is a straight up admission of guilt. They have violated virtually every single appraisal law ever written. I defy anybody to show me in the Texas Property Tax Code, Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, Texas Constitution, where anybody has the authority to take any document, any value outside of its software that was authorized by the board of directors to be used, manipulate it, put it in Excel, and put it back. There's no such thing. There's your proof of irrefutable fraud. Like I said, DCAD is the gift that keeps on giving because they have broken every single appraisal law written. Can't be any clearer than that.
Mitch, let's listen to one more thing because I really want the viewers to understand what you're saying. First of all, we're being taxed. First, our unborn children are being taxed, you guys. Our unborn children are bankrupt when they're born. And we need you guys to step up. We need you guys to step up and save your money and fight these appraisal districts. And there's no math. You're hearing them manipulating it. But what you guys, the other thing is that we really haven't covered too much is how much they bully people, is how much these ARB boards, these appraisal review boards actually bully people and embarrass people. And really the only way to get things done is to fight back. And Mitch, I want to play this audio real quick of, an enforcement officer that reached out. I don't think we're going to be able to play his video today, but I want to play the audio from the ARB board of when, he was being yelled at. I mean, this person had to threaten to call the police on the ARB member, for disorderly conduct. And this is a taxpayer just trying to get a fair shake. Listen to this audio, Mitch.
Well, it's supposed to follow U.S. path.
Okay, continuing, what would you like to do?
Go ahead.
So are you noting this, or are you making a recommendation or statement of something that you want done?
Well,
I'm just asking, you're quoting me stuff that I don't know about.
Tone it down.
I'm toning it down. This is toned down based on what you just did.
Let me explain something to you. I'm hard to read, but I'm not that hard here.
Okay,
Okay.
I have a
So tone
naturally
yourself
loud
down.
voice.
Tone yourself down, or I'll go get an officer. You want to get
Mitch, he got yelled at when he asked him to calm down and threatened to get him arrested. This man laughed at this taxpayer. And by the way, again, this taxpayer has been helping the community. Mitch, if what would say you were there, all right, what would you like to say to your own appraisal district on behalf of everything that you see going on here today? And I'm sorry, not just today, by the way. I don't want to discredit your work for the, your body of work has been amazing, but what would you like to say, Mitch?
There's problems on both sides, and I always try to look at the other side's perspective as to what's happening, because you have to understand it. And that ARB panel was completely out of line. There's no justification. And part of that is lack of training. Part of that in reality is that I look at them as nothing more than a parrot without the benefit of intellect. And that happens because they repeat stories that they think they know without even looking at the documents. And yesterday I held up one page that had 67 documents on it that nobody's read. They haven't read USPAP. They haven't read the Texas Constitution. The training manuals that they get, or the videotape, is roughly 14 years old for the ARB members. They're supposed to be an independent body brought in at the behest of the state comptroller. They're supposed to be independent. They are not. The vast majority of the values that are agreed to by the ARBs are those of the values as stated under threat of perjury by the RPAs, the Registered Property Advisors. The bottom line is that the system is completely cooked against the real estate taxpayer. So what we're doing here is trying to give the real estate taxpayer, be it commercial and or single family and or multifamily, what have you, the ability to fight back using the law and using the truth. Over and above that, as you've seen, a lot of people go to these ARB meetings. They're not armed with enough information. They don't have a one page in a spreadsheet format that simply says, here are the comps that are real comps under 2301B and 2301E of the Texas Property Tax Code, and under uniform and equal in the Texas Constitution. They're not armed with any of that information. So there's problems on both sides of the table, but the CAD is responsible, and they don't educate the public. They do just the opposite. They gaslight the public. Well, our property values are at median home value of $514,000. There's not a stitch of truth in that statement. Like I said, DCAD is the gift that keeps on giving. They've wrapped themselves in razor wire. And from this point forward, by virtue of all these videos, every time they try to wiggle out of something, they're going to get sliced. And the goal is to shut them down. They do not deserve to exist. It is a criminal conspiracy to defraud the public, and they need to be shut down. And that is where Mr. Cardone should have gone. Now, he may not know it, but he does now.
Yeah. Let me play for the viewers just one more part about that interview, and they're going to talk about what they believe the solutions are. And they may not be bad solutions, but they may be the wrong solutions. Let's hear.
At home, very basic ideas of saving your money and ensuring that, you save first was sort of a fundamental in my household. But for me, it started with my mother. I don't know that that's going on enough. If you're not getting it at home, I don't think you're getting it at school either.
No, you're definitely not. People are using credit cards. We have the highest credit card debt in the history of planet Earth and plastic at the highest interest rates in history. And yet people continue to use those as a solution to pay for things when they should be learning how to produce more income for themselves, which, by the way, there's endless opportunities, more opportunities today to produce extra revenue than there ever has been in history.
Mitch, do you agree with those solutions? I mean, I would certainly say that there definitely is a huge lack of financial education in the community, in the homes, with schools. And, I would also say there's a huge lack of, credit card knowledge, and credit cards actually is a huge financial trap. What could you add to what they were suggesting the solution would be as far as on the consumer front? The consumers know to step up, sign the protest. It is in the description. Take 10 seconds, guys. Join the movement, join the solution. But Mitch, what are some of the other things that you think that normal everyday consumers can do to get ahead of this, if anything?
Getting rid of credit card debt is job one because the interest rates are off the charts. And you'll find that without credit card debt, you start to get clarity of mind. And clarity of mind will help you get through these other problems. The issue with, there's no solution other than bankruptcy in many cases, but you can deal with the problems. But again, not getting in under the hood enough, from what Mr. Cardone was saying, is that you have people, i.e. 37% of the population, household population, are going to lose their home and or go bankrupt. Well, in that number is a very interesting problem. So you have all these people that may have 1, 2, or 3 jobs. So the idea when somebody says, well, you can go and create another job, or there's multiple opportunities out there, it's a full circle problem in that if they don't have the knowledge to protect themselves against credit card debt and understand why your balanced books must be balanced, how do you expect them to go and start a company without money or capital or an idea or an infrastructure under them? So in other words, it's a hollow statement. It's placating the public without getting to the fact of the matter. And just recently, I want to point out that it's not just somebody who owns a $300,000 home. We have a subdivision. It has expensive homes, $1.5 million, $2 million. And we lived through this problem back in 2008. We had 30% of the houses go up for sale because even as what you would think are, quote, millionaires, the truth of the matter is they're no better than the people who have all the credit card debt. It's just a different scale. But the reality is they don't know how to handle it, and they got into trouble. And coincidentally, that was about 30%. So that 37% median household income, median appraised household value that's going to lose. Well, that's pretty close to the 30% that we suffered in 2008. And we're starting to see that now. We have people in that particular subdivision, 3 of which right now, that's 10%, that are going to have to sell their homes because they can't afford the homes. Well, why can't they? What happened? If mom loses a job or dad loses a job, There's not enough income in that property to sustain the maintenance, let alone the real estate taxes. The two things can't exist on the same planet. The books aren't balanced. And that is really the underlying problem with what Mr. Cardone was saying. It's not what he said, it's what he didn't say, it's what's missing. And that is when you get in under the hood, you start to get to the truth.
Well said, sir. And I hope you guys understood what Mitch just said. I mean, you could be low class, okay, just you own one house. That's a $300,000 house. But if you are living the right way, you eventually pay your house off. We could be more successful than millionaires. The millionaires are this close, some, a lot, are this close to financial wreck because it has more to do with you as a person and how you're spending than drowning in debt.
In today's world, living with clarity of mind is more important. And there are many more people that live in $300,000 and $400,000 homes than there are people who live in $1 million homes. You're much better off. Stop following Joe Smith next door. Get that debt gone, because this system will collapse. It has no choice. I mean, we showed that in the video with $142 trillion of debt. This cannot be retrieved. Can it be somewhat blunted? Sure. But the politicians aren't going to blunt it. They're just going to, just like they did in Fort Worth, they're going to insist, give us more money so we can cover up the bankruptcy. And that is a compounding, cumulative circle straight into hell.
Yes, sir. But it does start with awareness, guys. And Mitch, again, thank you for your time. We're going to get out of here. We kept you guys, for a little while tonight. Hopefully you guys got overwhelming value. Comment below. Let us know what you think. And if you're out there investing in real estate, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.